So allow us to start from the very end. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do, and maybe just something about the toolkit that you feel passionate about. Changamka.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We've just had tea. My name is Lillian Gichuru, Legal and External Affairs Manager at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. It's good to see you all here.
Caroline Karugu, a real estate lawyer with the firm of Ashitiva Advocates. What I'm passionate about and what I'll be speaking about is the ESG space when it comes to the real estate sector. Thank you.
Afternoon, my name is Brian Muindi. I'm a partner at TOOLKIT Law, where I head the corporate and commercial department. On the incubator program, we are taking the lead in the legal contracting, so all the documentation that's required for it. So that would be where we're most passionate on. Excellent.
Afternoon, my name is Adnan Khan. I'm a partner at ALN Kenya, more specifically in Njawala and Ghana. I co-lead the real estate and construction team, so that's part of what we'll be discussing today.
Good. Last and very much least. Alex Njage from Bowmans, Kenya. I head the commercial property division of the real estate team. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. Yeah, so, you know, there is a way, the Bible says the last shall be the first, and the least. So thank you so much for the introduction. We are really honored to have every single one of you be part and parcel of this panel. And of course, I think we want to break it down. I think we got requests from part of the audience. We really need to understand these things. So you don't want it to be complicated. We want it so simple so that everybody can be able to understand and appreciate, and we'll carry everybody together. So of course, earlier presentation and even the setting of the stage by Zoraba, he did mention that, of course, it's real estate coming together with capital. That's what a real estate investment trust is all about. Just being able to meet the needs of the real estate growth and what is happening in that space, and bringing capital to it. So even as we handle this panel, distinguished panel, we'll begin with the real estate itself. Najua, people say vitu kwa ground ni different. You know, that means that things on the ground could be different. So even as we are talking about REITs, we want to understand how is the market looking from a real estate point of view. As commercial lawyers, what is happening in that space? What are some of the challenges? What are some solutions that the real estate investment trust can portend even for that sector? Or maybe what are your thoughts generally? So Alex, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I will attempt to use the words Gikonyo Gitonga avoided. So I think in the real estate sector, mambo imeshagamka.
Put your hands together for him.
Imeshagamka sana. I think the pipeline looks good. There is a lot of development going on in the country. There were a lot of cranes in the city that were not moving during COVID for a long time, and now they're moving. And it's in different sectors. I was reading the other day that yields for light industrial, warehousing, and the like are becoming some of the best in the sector as opposed to residential, office, and so on and so forth. So I think people really want to invest in real estate, and they're putting money in. Now, what I always tell myself is these guys are putting in money in real estate without any incentive at all. What if there were proper incentives in place? Because they are not putting in money and not getting a return. So what if there were proper incentives in place? And I think that's where, that's one of the key things we need to get right. When I look at incentives in the real estate sector, I would say two things. One, incentive for the landowner and developer, both of them, if they're different, to be able to get attracted to the REIT. The second one is for the ones I call off-takers of the shares, not of the units, of the shares the housing shares. Oh, no, housing chairs. The off-takers of the housing chairs or real estate units, they also need some incentive. So I'll give you an example. I still have a bank account at Housing Finance, which I opened when I used to earn 8,000 shillings. And I was skinny and I had a long neck like a giraffe. My good friend Mbadha Mbidhi remembers those days. And I started saving with that account because apparently under Kenyan tax laws, I could get a tax relief of a maximum of 40,000 shillings a year. Now, if you were to take that incentive, and they tell me today that if I invest in REITs, I will have a tax relief of 1 million shillings a year from my saving into a REIT. Trust me, I will be putting that money there. Whether or not, the REIT actually makes money. So for me, it's incentives on both sides, on the developer and landowner side, and on the people who buy the units. I know we don't have much time, so that's what I'll say for now. Wacha niache Adnan Khan ashagamke sasa.
Nitachangamka. So anyway, I think apart from the incentives, we just probably need to look at in terms of, and I guess the real estate sector in general. A lot of investors kind of pulled out when they saw the currency sliding against the US dollar. You can't attract investors and tell them we're going to give you 10, 12, 15% interest on a bond, but your currency has depreciated by 20%, right? Means nothing. It would probably explain why also, we had a bit of influx out of the stock exchange. So we need to probably look at how do we invest in dollars or a currency that's more stable, guarantee a certain return. I know it's difficult to guarantee returns. And that's probably one way to, as part of the incentives. Because, again, Finance Bill, Finance Act, the way you want to look at it is apart from the sliding shilling, you're now going to hit people with even more taxes. It's just going to discourage foreign investment coming in. I think other than, the incentives and the taxes, the other thing that we're looking at, and which is a bit of a concern right now, is just zoning policies and planning framework, right? If you looked at Nairobi 10 years ago, you knew which areas were apartments, which one was industrial area, which one was a commercial center, which was a high-end living zone. Unfortunately, today, it's a free-for-all, right? Not too far from this hotel, you look at some of the developments, neighbors can literally greet each other through their balconies. You have someone's kitchen overlooking into someone's bedroom, right? Now, it's very easy to blame government here because you're saying there's government approving this. That's far from the reality because remember, the person developing this is not government, it's private sector. We have a responsibility to build responsibly. It's very easy for us to say, the problem is with developers, and I know we have some here, is greed. We want to maximize profit and build things. But if you're going to build something like that, remember, no one wants to look into someone else's bedroom. So your ability to sell or market that will be lower. We are also losing out on a lot of green space. And I know Azmina is going to be very happy that I've mentioned green space. We're going to turn Nairobi.
Double thumbs up.
We're going to turn Nairobi into a concrete jungle, which it already is. Yeah. And there's a lot of other cities that are turning like that. So I think that's something that we probably need to look at.
Wow, thank you very much. Yeah, so at least we've gotten some of the challenges that are there and even solutions from the incentives to also even other considerations that need to be put in, and also even for the reality. People are being pained not only by the sliding Kenya shilling, but also the taxes that are also getting more and more by the day. I think the property tax, again, it was also going up and all that, and government is now really keen on that. So the ground is really shaking and it needs to changamka. Yeah, so let's hear maybe from Brian, especially on maybe when it comes to real estate, because I believe then the real estate investment trust is actually a legal instrument. It's a trust, and then it also has different components that also help people to invest like in real estate, like maybe they would in very simple layman languages as shares. But of course, it's the legal work that would be involved in that, and that's why we are having the REIT toolkit. There are so many contracts that are there. How different is that from other types of maybe contracts that are there? And maybe you can just put color to all that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think when it comes to REITs, as you've said, the contracting for REITs is really like the Swiss Army of, the Swiss Army knife that has so many components inside. In the toolkit, what we've tried to do is give the basics, the key things that you require, the contracts that you need, whether it's with the trustee itself, which establishes the REIT, the contracts with the REIT managers, the contract with the property managers, and so on. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to REITs. And I think the Fahari and former Stanley really has paid school fees for all the REITs that are coming to market. In this room, I can see 3 current or former REIT managers of these REITs, and I can tell you, if Ken was to say his experience starting, Stanley, and the experience, say, of Elliot for the Econ REIT currently, it's worlds between. The CMA has been very, very supportive. Each of the REITs that is currently in market, has gone to the CMA and said, look, this works, this doesn't work. This is what the regulations say. The regulations came in 2013. They just don't work for this market. There's a number of things that are not practical, will not lead to the development of the REIT sector. And CMA has always, to my mind, if you look at the prospectus for each REIT that has come to market, from beginning to the end, you will see at a minimum 3 or 4 very distinct features that REIT has. So the good news for promoters, potential promoters, potential REIT managers, is that you have a lot of, you have a regulator who's very keen, a regulator who understands the market, who wants to listen to the market, and a regulator who takes the feedback. Recently, they were doing the amendments. We gave, I think, a draft maybe 2025. Unfortunately, I think the only amendment I saw was the bottom-up amendment, which was to reduce the eligible investors from 10 million to 10,000. That's the only change that's been made to the regulations. We hope that there will be more, because there's certainly a lot more changes that need to be there. But over and above, and just overall, the CMA is very responsive. So you shouldn't look at, for example, when you look at the kit, you will see that there are particular, very key requirements of REITs that it seems that are cast in stone. Potential promoters, potential trustees, that's not something that should deter you as a matter of, just simply because that's the letter of the law. You can always go to the CMA to try and get a number of these changed. REITs are unique from your other real estate investments. They're unique from the contracts that you have for any other real estate sector. For example, your leasing, when you're buying property, when it comes to leases, REITs have very particular regulations on the tenure. So it can't be more than, less than 25 years. If you look at a majority of the leases that you have in the market, there's not too many properties where you'll have a lease for that period. Maybe your commercial ones, and then you'll have people trying to run away from, and the real estate people will tell you they want to run away from having them, controlled tenancies and fixed terms. So you have to overcome that challenge when it comes to REITs. When it comes to lending and borrowing, a REIT borrower is not the same as any other corporate borrower. They've got leverage limits that they can't get above. So your lender, your typical lender who's used to lend into your corporates, when they're lending to a REIT, and I think in this market we haven't had too many of those transactions, it's a very unique structure, again because of the security, not just the limit on the leveraging, but the security that the REIT can offer to this lender. So look at for those who are considering getting into the TOOLKIT, the incubator program, by all means look at it. If there are a number of things that look extremely prohibitive, don't let that discourage you. You can speak to even the ILAM. I think Stanley is the one that is the most diverse REIT in this market. If you just look at, just study it. In fact, I had Ruth speaking about a case study on affordable housing earlier for RAC. I think the study on the development of that particular REIT is, it's a very good case study for everyone who wants to be in this market. The other thing that I would say is unique about REITs and is key is when it comes to your investment policies and sectors. Now, most of the other investment vehicles, you don't have too many restrictions on how you can invest, what kind of real estate properties you can invest, what kind of sectors you can invest. So whether you want to do your commercial, your warehousing, your industrial, for it's very specific in terms of what your trust deed says, how you get the approval for it, the sectors and so on. So it's a whole different ballgame. But the starting point is you go into this toolkit, you get the info. You then would need to have specialist advice on each of these sectors, as I said, because there's no such thing as one size fits all.
Well, thank you for that. And of course, there's a lot that is happening, even especially on that working group. He's part of the working group that is doing the legal contracts in the REIT toolkit. So I want your question. You want interaction. So you want more questions from the floor that will take maybe one or two burning ones. So prepare. I'll ask Anne. I don't know if you can get the extra mic, and then we'll be coming. But before we get to the questions, we'll get to hear maybe on the ESG side of things. And maybe we can start with Lillian. Maybe telling us what is ESG, and maybe as a quasi-regulator, as the NSC, what is NSC doing about ESG? How does it, how is the grand scheme of things, and why is it important? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So ESG is not new. I'm sure you've all heard of ESG. It's become a buzzword of late. But it's simply that. ESG is environmental, social, governance. And it's basically a framework that is used to measure a business's performance against its sustainability and ethical practices. So environmental, for instance, how efficient is your energy? How efficient is your water usage? How is your waste management like? So those are just examples of issues of environmental. Social, human rights. Are you giving people equal opportunities? Are you dealing with issues of child labor and those kind of things? When you go to governance, how is your board constituted? Are you giving your shareholders rights and that kind of thing? So why is it becoming more and more important? It's because investors just don't want to know what the bottom line is. Of course, profits are good. That's why we all invest, right? We want to know what the bottom line is. We want to know what the financial ratios look like. How is our cost-income ratio like? But other than that, they want to know how are you impacting the people around you? How are you impacting the environment around you? And they are using these non-financial indicators, number one, to measure growth opportunities for them, risks. So it's increasingly becoming more and more important for businesses to integrate ESG in their strategies. And so what is the NSE doing to support this or to contribute to this whole ESG conversation? We did issue guidelines, ESG guidelines, in 2021, November of 2021. And these guidelines are basically a very granular, a very tactical approach on ESG reporting, because there are various standards, there are various methods people around the world use for ESG reporting. But what we have tried to do as the Nairobi Securities Exchange is to give companies, just not listed, obviously we are quasi-regulator, and I should not be saying that aloud, I see my regulator here, for listed companies, but we are also encouraging non-listed entities to use these guidelines in their ESG reporting. So basically, it's a how-to document. Number one, if you interact with it, it will show you how do you integrate ESG into your strategy. How do you even establish or identify what ESG topics your particular business operates in? How do you measure the materiality of that ESG topic, and eventually how do you then report on your ESG issues? So we are happy to interact more and to give guidance, when called upon. But in a nutshell, Waggema, that's what we are doing as the Nairobi Securities Exchange in the ESG space.
All right, thank you very much, Lillian. Lillian, her initials are LG, life is good. So please with ESG, that's what I like to know. Yeah, so we have also CK, that is Karugu, who will be telling us more, especially other than what is mandatory, what other things can maybe people comply with, especially on ESG. I noted you are very passionate about it, so please, I won't restrict you. You can just go ahead and tell us, and then also maybe just also mention what is required to improve on ESG compliance as well.
Yeah, thank you. Irungu.
Yes.
I call you Irungu, everyone else calls you Waggema. But so the ESG space, when it comes to real estate, has gotten a lot of attention, and mainly because real estate is one of the sectors that is being policed a lot when it comes to ESG, because of the high contribution to green gas emissions that buildings have. So at the moment, the estimation is that 40% of the greenhouse emissions actually come from buildings. And if you move closer to the cities, the number goes up to around 70. So we are one of the sectors that everyone is looking to see what are the changes that we're going to adopt in terms of the way we build our buildings, the way we occupy our buildings, and the impact it's having on the environment and even on people. So when it comes to the ESG space, one of the things that people are looking at is the life cycle of a building. If you look at a building, by the time a building comes up, you have the design stage, you have the construction stage, and then you have the life of the building, which I think is estimated that for any building you put up, assume that for 40 years, this building will be in existence. So you're building for the future. You're actually not building for today. And so when you look at the construction phase, this is where a lot of the impact is actually felt on the environment. So if you think about the materials we use, how are those materials extracted? How are the materials transported? Especially in this part of the world, we are very good at consuming materials that come from really far. You want an Italian fitted kitchen or a German fitted kitchen, but what does it take for that kitchen to arrive to your house? How many emissions have been, put out into the environment? So things of that nature. You're talking about how do we dispose our construction materials when we finished building. So there's a lot of legislation that's coming in to try and monitor what developers are doing, even in the construction phase. And we are looking into that, and we are advising, that you need to begin to think about how green your materials are going to be. There's a building code that I think has already been published and supposed to come in this year, that gives a little bit more freedom to developers in terms of how to source materials. Before, it was only brick and mortar, and it was very strict as to how you could build. The building code was very strict. It was based on the British, I think, code or system in 1968. It's quite old. But the new one is a little bit more advanced, and you're seeing now some European standards coming in, where they're allowing us to now use locally sourced materials and to be able to then use different materials for us to build. There's a lot of technology coming in also in the alternate building material space. And if you look it up, you'll see there are a lot of cost savings for developers, but for most of the impact is actually being felt on the environment itself. When it comes to the occupation of the buildings, buildings actually consume a lot of energy. I think we just don't realize it. I think the first time I realized just how bad our energy consumption is when I was working on a mall, and there was no way they were going to put the electricity cost for the common areas on the service charge, because the service charge would have been equal to the rent. So they had to split the energy cost so that they pass it down to the tenants and then still have a service charge, because it was ridiculous. And this is a mall that actually had a solar plant. So if you think about just how much we consume, our industries, our factories, it's becoming very clear that even when it comes to the occupation stage of the building, we now need to control what are tenants doing when they're in the buildings. So you're seeing a lot of green leases coming into place where you're trying to control as a developer the usage of even power and water. You know, I've seen leases where that require you to have certain energy efficient lighting. If you're a tenant, if you're a big tenant like a restaurant, they want to see what fridges you're using, what cooking, appliances you're using, because they need to be certified as a green building, and so they can't just have anyone coming in and doing what they're doing. When it comes to lighting, this is just a funny story. I remember when I went on one of my secondments to a law firm in England, and I'm working in the office, I'm by myself, and all of a sudden the lights go off in my office. So I look outside and I can see, okay, I'm from Kenya, so I'm assuming there's a blackout. So, but I can see that in the other offices, the lights are still on. And so, when I stand to go and see what's wrong, the lights come back on. And so someone mentioned, if you don't move, the sensors will assume there's no one in the room and the lights automatically will go off. So that's the kind of technology we are talking about when it comes to energy savings. But in my current office, I think there's someone whose job is to go at the end of the day to make sure all the lights are off, So there's definitely an interplay between technology and the ESG space. There's a lot of technology out there. I don't want to dive really deep into it that can help developers save so much when it comes to their energy efficiency, their water usage. They can measure what it is that you're using. And to just add to that, one of the other things that we are seeing coming into this space is the certification of buildings. We now have EDGE. I think EDGE is in Kenya now, and they are training people to become certifiers of buildings. It will get to a point where this will become a requirement for you to access certain things. If you think about green financing right now, there are certain parameters a developer has to have to be able to access financing. So if you can already start thinking about that, if you're building something new, if you want to borrow from a funder who wants to fund only green developments, what does it look like? What would your building need to have? And so you begin to check some of those boxes. So some of these solutions are legal in the sense that they are regulatory, but some of them are coming in through different, from different sectors. So the financing, green financing is one of the areas that has really driven the ESG space, and also the cost savings that we are seeing, and also the technology that we are seeing. The other thing to consider, and she did speak about social, is that we need to consider just how much time as humans we spend in buildings. I think we underestimate how much impact buildings have on us, on our mental well-being, our physical well-being, how much lighting you're exposed to, what is the air conditioning in where you are. I was quite cold when I was sitting over there, and I was just thinking, the impact it's having on us. So that is also another reason why buildings and any kind of development is being, there's quite a bit of regulation coming in. There's a court case that I think it was last year. It was a landmark court case that stated that failure to provide playgrounds is now considered an infringement on human rights. And it was a Kenyan court. Now the courts are getting involved. How are you building? And I think Adnan had mentioned that. Can we be a bit more responsible? I know as lawyers we advise on the legal aspects, but before the laws come in and police us, is there any way we can begin to be more responsible and more aware of our impact on the environment and on people? Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Let's put our hands together for the entire panel, even for the insights that have been shared. Yeah, so we are with lawyers, their time is a premium, so they have offered for free consultation. So if you have a quick question, please, this is your opportunity. You can lift up your hand and Anne would be able to give you the microphone. Please, lawyer time, going once, going twice. Two hands, okay, thank you. All right, so maybe we can listen to her. You can introduce yourself, your name, and maybe the question. And maybe if it is directed to someone specific, you can go ahead. Thank you.
I think I'm going by the hashtag nimechangamka.
There you are.
So my name is Jenny Kunywa. I work in Central Bank, and I'm a trustee. I'm here as a trustee. And as I've listened to the presentations, which have been wonderful, I've learnt a lot. Actually, it's the second time I'm seated somewhere where REITs is being mentioned. Before that, I had only heard it from my son, who, because of him, I just realized after looking at the names that I at least know 4 of the people here because of my son. And I realized the issue of REITs is something that we don't know about much as a country. And listening to all the presentations, I've realized that I have a suggestion to make to ensure that REITs gets known. I look at all the organizations that are here. I've not heard that there's anything you're doing about marketing, publicity, and serious public awareness, where you actually put money aside and use the media to actually speak there in whichever manner, so that people get to know about REITs. Sometimes with the Kenyans, there's a problem that if what you're talking about looks like there's government, there some people will get scared. And I believe that could have happened for REITs. And the issue of public awareness, education, somebody mentioned it. I realized that we all of us can be educators where we are. So that where I sit as a board of trustee in that board, I should ensure that they understand because I'm here. So it's the whole thing of whoever is here and can manage to put across some good information which can be used across some standard kind of document, that when people attend forums like this, they can actually get it, and after I leave here, I'm able to articulate that properly wherever I am. Because as pension funds, we sit on billions or are managing billions of shillings. And currently, with the COVID, the global climate that has been not very good, and the economic times that we are in, more so even this country, even the politics and all, there's a way things have been messed up. So that the products or what we have to invest in is not very good. And much as it's not good, even if you think about a pension fund, that affects the members and whatever they may receive at the end. So it's a question of how do we market this, because these are the alternative things that we should be thinking about, so that all the money is not going to treasury bills and bonds, listed somewhere, when it could be doing something bigger. So I thought that I would share that and ask that we come up with a standard document that can be used by all. Simple one, because at the moment the problem with the pension fund, sometimes you find that you may have many of the government, the people may have been put there for political reasons. For them to even understand what is being stated, they'll forget it by the time they're out of the door. They may not even ask or make many comments in a setup, but they're the board that is making the decisions. So that's that we think about that. I've liked the whole idea of ECG, and I've had it not so many times because of my nature of work, but what I'm also saying for the REITs is the same I say for ECG. We need to see what to do to ensure that the government makes it something mandatory, not just for those companies that are listed or for public entities, but it becomes for all. It becomes a law where you're actually checking and getting people either being given some incentives or facing some penalties. Because this world, there's nothing which will, I don't know what words to use, but we need to ensure that we protect the world, the universe, because the way things are, I have sometimes heard of children who are worried that they may not live long because it looks like they will have very poor lives. That is not what I would want for my grandchildren. I have children, I expect grandchildren. So it's to thank you all, and to say thank you for a good presentation, for the good preparation. I've actually enjoyed being here at this workshop today. It's been a blessing to me. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, hearing from Central Bank telling you don't invest in bills, you know, I don't know if, and pension. Yes, all right, okay, thank you very much. But I'm glad that actually she learned about REITs through her son. You see, word of mouth marketing, I think the point is home. And like the chairman did commit at REK, we are doing a lot, especially to do with education. We'll step up, want to make it a household. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Azmina Banji, and I'm the chairperson of the Kenya Green Building Society. And I really want to thank the panel, all of you who've touched on building sustainably and green. But I also want to say a couple of things to add to what Carol said. 80% of the buildings that are going to be built in Africa are not yet built. And you're going to see that development happening over the next couple of decades, right? So it's really, really important that we not only build sustainably, but as Adnan said, we need to really focus on the S component of ESG. We need to make sure that it's inclusive, that if we're doing affordable housing, it's dignified, right? And it's affordable, because it really isn't today. So thank you all of you for your contribution on the sustainability aspect, and we hope we can work together to make a difference.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for her. Yes. Actually, she's the one who came up with the idea of dancing. Chairman, it was not my fault. Let me give honor where it was due. She actually made a demand, so I told her we'll do it after the break. So thank you very much.
That's the health and well-being part.
Yes, well-being is very important. The social part of ESG. Thank you very much. So thank you, Azmina. And I think we'll take it even to what she has shared. Yes, please. You can introduce yourself and your organization and maybe your comment, question.
It's good afternoon, sorry. My name is Farhin Kasim from Kenya Development Corporation. I'm part of the REITs committee that has been formed. And my key area is legal. Good afternoon, Council. Now, I have quite a number of questions, can be answered by anyone from the panel. I didn't really quite get it, because from our conversation last time, we were aware that taxes were being exempted from REITs. Yeah, but from the panel, I don't know if I've not received the communication well. Is it going to be taxed or not? Secondly, contracts. I didn't get it from Brian. I needed to know what's the difference between the contracts we are drafting today and the contracts that will be given with the I REITs and the D REITs between us, between RAC, between us, between our clients. Yeah? What's the difference? Is it a must for us to include the ESG components in the contracts? Will it be key to ensure that our clients actually impose those sanctions? And can we make it mandatory to our clients, or will we be forcing them to do something they're not able to do? Thirdly, I'm actually really appreciative. You've given me so much insight to the extent that at least now I understand why I'm here. For ESG, do you see it growing, considering the current economic situation going around right now in Kenya? And if not, can we still proceed with the REITs, or we just have to bring in the component of like green energy? Actually, I'm on green energy, because definitely it might be I can imagine a client coming to us and then they go like, I can't afford this. What do you do?
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for her. Yeah. You know, that is KDC. All the investment government does is KDC. And I like the fact that they're asking questions. And they should be amongst, I think they are a part of the people who are going to be joining the toolkit. And we are really super excited that even government is interested in coming onto it. So, of course, our legal counsel, Karibuni Sana, you can just go ahead and maybe pick up some of those questions. You can just feel free. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me take some of the first two. So on the taxes, firstly, as an overall statement, yes, REITs are more tax efficient for investing in real estate. But then tax is very nuanced. You know, you have different levels of taxes. So you have your income tax, you have the tax that's going to the distributions that are being earned by your unit holders. You've got tax on the transfers of property. So for each of those levels, you have different considerations. In general, REITs are more efficient than the traditional routes of investing into real estate. That said, the regulations, what they have, they prescribe that REITs in Kenya will be unincorporated trusts. Now, globally, you'll find there's some countries that have REITs as companies, others have them as incorporated trusts. It goes to the point I had made earlier on the prescriptive regulations, but then you have the regulator who is keen to listen. RAC was very instrumental, ourselves and I think a number of other players, in pushing for an amendment. Previously, the regulations only refer to investee companies. So you have the REIT itself, which is an incorporated trust. That incorporated trust will invest in properties either directly or through a corporate entity. The REIT regulations consider or they stipulate that that investment is through an investee company. So RAC and a number of the players in this sector, lobbied both CMA and KRA to have this extend to other entities, for example, LLPs, which are corporate entities. So you will find that then there was, I think KRA then did the draft regulations which permitted the extension. I don't know if those regulations are effective, they're still draft. So the tax practitioners will tell you on paper, it's one thing, but when you go to do the actual transfer of the property, and you're saying that it's from a REIT REIT buyer, and this entity is owned by a REIT, the implementation is still sketchy. Then you have, for example, the other REITs, I think the recent one, was it Lab Trust, that has an incorporated trust that holds the properties. So again, you don't have a one-size-fits-all. You have the regulations say this, but you go to the trustee and then the trustees and to CMA, and you petition to have some of these nuances. It remains to be seen whether KRA will adopt and even improve on the regulations when it comes to tax. So depending on the vehicle you use, then you have a number of different tax treatments. You would need to, again, it depends. Is it a commercial property? Because then you're talking about your VAT. Yeah. So again, you would need to get specific advice on the particular property that is being bought. Yeah. But in general, definitely the most tax advantageous way to invest in real estate property, both for the developers and for unit holders. Your second question on the contracts. So the contracts that are in the toolkit are intended to be a guide. So you will find, for example, it's not just contracts. So you'll have, for instance, you'll be told the things you require, even on the commercial end, like your prospectus, your offering memorandum. These are the key things that you require. You then take that so that you have a starting point. By the time it's not meant to substitute any of the people who are the advisors who are here in the morning or ourselves. We don't want to be taken out of this equation. Yes, we still want to earn a living. But what they will do is they will guide you on these are the key considerations. I will tell you that putting a REIT together will take you maybe 1.6 or something north of that. Sometimes it can be faster, but if you're more prepared before you start engaging these advisors, then that process becomes a lot faster. In terms of the differences, I think it does the differences between those contracts. Definitely each of those contracts is nuanced. So a contract for an IREIT is not the same. For example, Fahari is a listed IREIT. So the contracts for a listed IREIT would not be the same as an unlisted REIT, because the regulations also prescribe what a listed REIT, or one that has, is closed-ended, can do, vis-a-vis what one that is for professional investors can do. Similarly, you also have, we haven't had one in market, and hopefully we'll have some coming soon, but you also have Islamic REITs. They have different, so you could have an IREIT that is Islamic, you could have a listed or an unlisted. Each of these will have different regulations, different provisions. So the toolkit is intended to give you the overall guide. Your DREIT, I think we have the only DREIT in the world. So again, it's very unique. So you cannot use one contract to apply across the board, whether it's on trust deed level or REIT manager level or property manager level. Each of those you would need to get advice, but we are happy to engage with KDC further on this.
All right, I can see deals are already being cut here. I'm being told we have 5 minutes to go, so I'll still request maybe the other questions on ESG. Is it mandatory? Maybe you can quickly comment. Must all REITs be mandatory, having the ESG compliance, and maybe just your thoughts around the same.
Okay. So the guidelines, with a heavy heart I say this, are not mandatory, but we are pleading. We are highly encouraging institutions to adopt. We are working or having conversations with CMA as to how we can make this mandatory, and to her point. But for now, they are not mandatory. But for listed entities, we actually are expecting that they will do the ESG reporting, just like they do annual reports, or issue shareholder circulars and that kind of thing every year. We are expecting ESG reports from listed companies. Unfortunately, and just as we will continue that conversation with CMA as to how we can, try and make this mandatory. And as to your question as to whether ESG is gonna stay, yes, ESG is here to stay.
With the tough economic times?
Absolutely. ESG equals sustainability. And if we stop looking at it as being a very expensive endeavor, in terms of course, it's more expensive to have solar panels, for instance. But look at it 50 years from now, 100 years from now. When we start, having those kind of conversations with our stakeholders, then you will realize actually the initial expense cannot be equated to, the benefit that we reap many, many years from now. And my takeaway from this will just be ESG equals sustainability. Let's have a beautiful world for our generations and generations to come.
All right.
So can I just add on that to that question? There's two ways to make it mandatory. In some REITs where you have institutional investors, they make it a requirement. If you have a REIT manager whose entity is a listed company, they make it mandatory because they themselves have the triple bottom line reporting, so they have to do it. So the two main drivers, other than the regulator, and you always don't want the regulator to force you to do things. You'd rather do it on your own because you can choose, is your investors, typically this is your institutional investors, and your REIT manager. Those two are key when it comes to making ESG a core part of the reporting.
And the solutions that we were providing, and you kind of like pick and choose. So when your building is being certified, you might not do solar, you might do something else. So at the end of the day, it's almost like a bouquet that you're putting together. The idea is that you can't do nothing. So if one is too expensive, or if your tenants are not are not capable to comply with some of the requirements, then you would offset that by doing something else. So when you're being certified, there would be certain requirements that they want to see. So don't think of it as all of us have to do this one solution. There's so many solutions in the market when it comes to sustainability. So you just pick and choose the ones that work as long as you meet a certain threshold. And like he mentioned, you'll be quite surprised that there are actually tenants who will come to inspect your building to say, because I have to comply, I have to occupy a building that is compliant. So that's the direction the world is going. So you do need to think about that as well. Yeah.
All
All right. Wow. Thank you so much. I think we've really gotten quite some good insights, and I can see a hand up there, but we are really pressed for time. I don't know if you can, okay. We give her 1 minute or 30 seconds. 30 seconds. All right. There you go. Anne, please give her the mic.
Mine is just to confirm that sustainability is here to stay. So any organization that actually reports under the IFRS will need to be reporting on sustainability. We have the Sustainability Board that has issued standard S1 and S2 that is on climate-related exposures and any other sustainability-related financial information. So if your organization or is set up in a company setup, then you will need to report on sustainability. So it is here to stay, and since it is now already on the IFRS side, for the public institutions, we have the IPSAs. So since ISSB now has already gone on the IFRS side, very soon they will issue guidelines on public sector, where some of the institutions here lie, and they will be required to report on sustainability too.
Wow, thank you for that. Your name, please, and firm?
Oh, Olive Gitao from Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company.
Excellent. So let's appreciate her. Yes, thank you.